disruptive.
Weird thing to happen.
So I really want to show people this because this is really daunting, folks. So we know that there is a mass migration crisis. There's an immigration crisis of the amount of people that are pouring in into countries like Canada, the United States, the UK, Ireland, France, all over the place, of migrants that we don't do proper background checks. We don't, facilitate them. We don't update our services, and we just crowd them into our communities and our towns that aren't capable with dealing with a mass population boom at such a short time frame. And we've seen this numerous times throughout many years now. And all we could do is really speculate on why exactly this is happening and why politicians just go to the nth degree of promoting this and further facilitating this, even though we should be cracking down on this. We should be properly vetting people in. We should be properly investigating to make sure we bring in proper jurisdictions and legality to facilitate people who actually want to contribute to our country and our society and our culture. But here's another example onto why mass migration is becoming a crisis. The billionaire class. The billionaire class, which no doubt, we have stated this before, we know that the billionaire class plays a huge emphasis on open borders. The billionaires, even Bernie Sanders, came forward and said that, open borders is a Koch brothers idea. Well, as reported by Zero Hedge here, so Jackson Hole's parting advice. Jackson Hole, giggity. I wonder if Epstein's familiar with that. Hey-o. Jackson Hole's parting advice. Accept even more migrants to offset demographic collapse, or else. So, for those who aren't familiar, what this Jackson Hole giggity event is this is where the billionaires gather together in a small, quaint American town and discuss everything from the economy to culture to, doing these psyops. It's basically the Americanized Davos. That's pretty much what this is. And they do this frequently, year after year. People aren't aware about this. They don't even know where Jackson Hole is. I don't even know where Jackson Hole is, giggity. I want to say it's Wyoming, but I think there's one in Canada. I'm not totally sure exactly where it's geographically located, but this is where the billionaire class gather together and facilitate these heinous actions, like forcing upon people to accept more migrants because they fear that there's going to be a demographic collapse. And their excuse is, people aren't making enough babies. That's one of their excuses. But we're going to show later on why this seems like total hypocrisy, because the people that say, people are not making enough babies, are the same people that complain throughout time that the world is overpopulated. So, which is it? Is it overpopulated or underpopulated? Are people having too many kids, or is there not enough kids? We'll find out soon enough. So, here, this is the article from Zero Hedge, and it says, it was first tried in Europe, and it was a catastrophic failure as millions of Syrian refugees and various radicalized Islamists overran the continent, sparking a historic right-wing backlash. It was then tried in the United States, and the record flood of illegal aliens at the southern border cost the Democrats the 2024 election. And now, with the entire world on edge against the growing wave of migrant aliens originating from Africa and the Middle East, the world's money-printing mega-brains at Jackson Hole, giggity, have decided that the third time will be the charm. So, there is growing backlash to mass migration. Growing backlash, even here in Canada. And just to clarify, I stated this before and I'm going to state this again. We are not anti-immigrant. We're not against immigration. If people desire to come to Canada for a better life and they actually want to go through the legal channels to become a part of Canadian society, we welcome that. We accept that. But when you pour in people, the last numerical value of people pouring in to Canada was over 800,000. 800,000 people just poured into Canada without us noticing, without immigration checks. They just poured these people in and then flood them into cities, and people were told, hey, you got to deal with it. You got to deal with it. Doug Ford gave them amnesty. Mark Carney allowed them to come in. And we don't know how to handle it. We don't know. We don't have the services adequate enough to take care of these people, let alone the people that we currently have right now. It's a simple math equation when it comes to migration, when it comes to immigration, when it comes to population. If you're going to have this much of a population boom in such a short rate, you're going to have to amp up the services. You're going to have to provide more hospitals, provide more libraries, provide more schools. You're going to have to reach out to have English second language courses because many of the people there don't speak English, which is one of our native languages here. It's English and French. That is part of the Canadian identity. And a lot of these people don't speak either. Just saying. While doing everything in their power to avoid discussing the Lisa Cook elephant in the room, either a criminal or I, has no idea how to fill out a mortgage, is allowed to set the price of the world's reserve currency. Top central bankers gather at Jackson Hole, giggity, warn that the world's largest economies will lack the workers they need to power growth and keep prices stable in the coming decades. So, what this is telling me, just like I suspected before, when Mark Miller, our immigration minister under Justin Trudeau, even admitted to this, the whole purpose of this is bringing in more people to replace the workforce. That they want to bring in people on a scab labor wage. They want to bring these people in, replace the current Canadian workforce with low-skilled labor so they can pay them less. They reap in the benefits from the government. The government subsidizes companies that pay migrants over Canadians, and they're doing this intentionally because they believe that it's benefiting the economy. Remember, Mark Miller said we had to do this for the economy because otherwise we'd be in a recession. Well, guess what? We're in a recession, baby. We're already in a recession. So how did that work out? How did that work out? Because unemployment is skyrocketing. It's continuing to climb. And now the people coming into the country to take the jobs at Tim Hortons and Burger King and McDonald's and all these low-skilled jobs that used to go to like teenagers, that teenagers can't even get employed, they're even losing their jobs. So how is that working out? How is that working out? That they want to replace you. Remember the great replacement theory that people like Tucker Carlson mentioned? That kind of did exist. It wasn't some, right-wing racist conspiracy. It actually is the thing. They want to replace a stable workforce with cheap labor. And as soon as everything becomes automated and AI, then they'll replace the migrants. And then what are people going to do? How are we going to survive? How is the human race going to survive when everything becomes robotic? That's what these mega brains, to quote what he said there, using his term of phrase, that's what these billionaires, these ghouls, are telling people. They're organizing together to take over how countries function and operate. These are the people that truly run the world. If you think that Mark Carney and Donald Trump and Keir Starmer and and Emmanuel Macron have anything to do with how they actually govern and function these countries that they represent, think again. It's because of these billionaires. Unless they attract more foreigners, and this is calculus, doesn't even include the hundreds of millions of jobs that will be lost to hallucinating chatbots. So, as they're telling you that we need to bring in more migrants because there's not enough workers, which is an obvious lie, they're already telling you that AI is already sweeping in. AI is going to replace everybody. Because guess what? You don't have to pay a robot zilch. A migrant, you could pay less than a Canadian, but a robot, you don't have to pay anything. You don't have to pay a single dime. They work 24/7. They don't need bathroom breaks. They don't need sponsorship. They don't need anything. But how is humanity going to survive? That's what I want to know. That's what a lot of people want to know. But it's happening, folks, at an alarming rate. And it's because we're seeing a lot of these NGOs, these organizations, fiercely promoting this. So you remember Century Initiative? This is the NGO that derives from Canada. This is the group that Mark Carney was a part of, that his good buddies, Mark Weissman, was part of, that told you that Canada needs to have 100 million population by the end of the century. That's why they had to bring as many migrants as possible without doing proper checks and balances, without any accountability. And here's Century Initiative saying, why is pulling back on immigration a bad idea? It results in less for Canada, less foreign investment, less diversity, and less global influence. Meaning if we don't have more migrants, oh no, the Century Initiative and George Soros and all these scumbags won't have their grimy hands on Canada. That would mean Canada would actually have to function like a country and be represented by Canadians. Oh no. Our CEO, Lisa Lalonde, I know Lalonde actually, hopefully not related, spoke about the critical task of building and planning for growth at the regional AUS Regions Rising National Summit. So this woman, part of the Century Initiative, is going to scold the people in the room that you have to incorporate more illegal aliens for our benefit. But she's not gonna reveal the entire game because she has to trick you. So that's why she's saying that it's for, foreign investments, for the country. You become less diverse. That's why you got to bring in more people, and scatter them and try to push them all together. Get in line. Funny how they don't mention about speech when it comes to diversity, but that's another topic for another day. So here's what she said.
And that leads to a second tactic we deployed. We made the alternative case to show why the easy answer, proposed by some, to simply stop immigration altogether, or like I heard this morning or hinted at this morning, pull back substantially, it's a really, really bad idea in the short term. And
by the way, nobody is against immigration. Nobody is against completely stopping immigration. We all know, we all come from somewhere. My family came from immigration. Many people came from immigration. Unless you're a native Canadian or indigenous, everyone came from somewhere. So the argument is not, people saying that we should stop immigration. No, the argument is that we're making is there has to be accountability. There has to be accountability. There has to be legal checkpoints to make sure we properly vet people into the country. So we don't get a mass influx of criminals. So we don't get illegal cartels that are drug traffickers, human smugglers, that we keep seeing constantly in the media, constantly in newspapers, all across the country. We properly vet these people So we make sure we adequate them into Canadian society. And it's not fair to us. It's not fair to the migrants. It's not fair to the people that went through the legal channels, that properly immigrated into the country. But this woman's saying, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. Why? Well, she's going to tell you.
In the long term for Canada. In the media, online, and through regional initiatives, we argued that this would result in an aging, less skilled workforce, less foreign investment, less diversity, and less influence on the global stage. And we challenged Canadians and our political.
So she's saying that, because the aging population, there's going to be less skilled employees. That's why we got to bring in migrants that don't have the adequate skills that a lot of Canadians do and replace them. This, again, it's all hypocritical. It's all garbage. It's all garbage. And if you really cared about the skills gap that they keep claiming that there's not enough workers to, fill in the trades or whatnot, why are you not reaching out to Canadians then? Why are you not reaching out to the younger demographic that is currently the highest unemployment bracket in the nation's history? High unemployment for young people that can't get work. Their first job ever. They can't get work. They can't get to fast food joints. They won't hire them. So why are you not reaching out to them? Instead of bringing in a bunch of migrants so you can scam them. Scam them for cheap labor.
Leaders to confront the more ambitious, critical task of building and planning for growth better, requiring us to totally rethink our approach to housing and infrastructure.
Wow. There you go. We got to bring these people in because there's not enough skilled workers. Not enough skilled workers. So let's bring in someone that hasn't properly been through the background, hasn't been vetted in. We don't know if they speak English or French, which is two of our national languages. That's a requirement to be a citizen in this country, to function within Canada. Just bring them in. Bring them in, replace the actual skilled workers that could benefit from a boost and actually incorporating better into the Canadian economy. No, let's replace them in with these scab employees so we can treat them like dirt. That's what this NGO is saying. That's what this woman is saying. That you are being replaced. You're being replaced. It's not shortages. It's not, no. You're being replaced. Because the billionaire class doesn't want to deal with you. They don't want unionization. They don't want people to be actually treated like people. Employees actually treated with benefits and respect and tolerance. And actually being a function society. That's why this is so gross. It literally is so gross that they do this. And here, this is from MLI. This is the Marshall McLuhan stated this. Mass immigration can cause enormous shifts in local culture, national identity, and community cohesion. Jeff Russ for Inside Policy. It says Marshall McLuhan explicitly cautioned that technology would make the world smaller and lead to conflict in his theorized global village. So all these billionaires that want to bring the population and smush them all together and replace the average worker with a migrant is going to cause chaos. And he predicted this. Marshall McLuhan predicted this. Experts predicted this was going to happen. But then what happens? The billionaires come in, they scold these people, they go into academia, they bribe them, they scold them, they blackmail them, and then they go along with it. And that's why nothing gets done. That's why none of these institutions will actually have the courage to stand up to fight this, to fight for proper border protection, to fight for, accuracy and accountability for immigration, which is vital for a country. If you don't have that, you don't have a country. You don't have a country. So we know that the billionaires benefit this from cheap labor and cheap workforce. Here's another example. This is from in America. One of the senators actually blurted out one of their reasons why they need mass migration. And it's kind of interesting and kind of hilarious, the excuse on why we need to bring foreigners from other countries into places like America because they're desperate for military recruits. You're going to have foreigners from other countries that the United States possibly bombed to then join the U.S. Army to fight their battles. It just seems so hilarious. It seems so hilarious that they would blurt this out loud and not think how crazy this is. So here's the Senator Dick Durbin. That's his legit name. Not kidding. I think he's from Illinois. I'm not totally sure the state, but here's what he said.
What troubles me about the debate now about the southern border is it is one half of the immigration equation. Yes, we need order at the border. Yes, we need to have changes in the laws that reflect the reality of the overwhelming numbers from all over the world who are coming to our shores and our border. But there's also...
So he even admits that, yes, it's a problem, it's a crisis, that's something we got to deal with. But here's the kicker.
Incredible demand for legal immigration into this country even now. The presiding officer, my colleague from the state of Illinois, has legislation which addresses one aspect of that. Her bill, and I hope I describe it accurately, says that if you're an undocumented person in this country and you can pass the physical and the required test, background test, the like, you can serve in our military, and if you do it honorably, we will make you citizens of the United States. Do we need that? Do you know what the recruiting numbers are at the Army and the Navy and the Air Force? They can't reach their quotas each month. They can't find enough people to join our military forces. And there are those who are undocumented who want the...
We can't find enough people to die for bankers. So the next best option, obviously, is to bring stragglers that possibly we bombed, we eradicated, we destroyed their country, forcing them to leave. Bring them into our army and fight for us. How can someone stand there and say that and not feel like a complete dumbass? How this guy, Dick Durbin, can stand there and preach that and not think, holy crap, I can't believe I uttered these words in a sentence. Yeah, mass immigration is a problem, but bring the people in. They can recruit into the army, you know, the army that possibly destroyed their homes and villages, that wiped out villages that they were accustomed to, and now we bring the migrants into our army to fight for us. How do you think that's going to work out? How do you think that's going to work out? Of course, he looks offside to make sure his handler's okay with this. Okay. Okay. Yeah. The donors say it's okay. Well, that explains why he's a majority whip. He's definitely whip boy. Look at this. He's looking off camera. He's surveying the donors. Okay. Did I do a good job? Do I get a paycheck now? Okay. So, cheap labor for corporations, military recruitment. There's the other side of that story. And there's more to this. So, here's Bill Clinton. Now, when Bill Clinton was president, he went on stage. He did national addresses talking about illegal aliens. He mentioned about how we got to control mass migration. And now, here's Bill Clinton presently. Bill Clinton on migrants. Most Americans recognize we got the lowest birth rate we've had in well over 100 years. We're not a replacement level, which means we got to have somebody come here if we want to grow the economy. So Bill Clinton, who, when he was the president, the leader of America, who complained about mass migration, how we got to vet people, how we got to have qualifications for people coming into the country, that we can't just mass drove everybody into the country. Now it's telling you, no, we got to do this because not enough of you are having kids. So here's what he stated.
A new direction to manage an immigration crisis in a tough time where there's all this upheaval all over the world, where there are border problems all over the world, where millions of people are trying to escape the misery they're in. And other people are saying, well, I want to do what I can and take what I can, but maybe there's a limit to how much we can do. In other words, I don't think Americans are anti-immigration, they're anti-chaos, right? They don't want us to do more than we can, but they recognize, at least most people do, we got the lowest birth rate we've had in well over 100 years. We're not at replacement level, which means we got to have somebody come here if we want to keep growing the economy. Unless one of you is one of these artificial intelligence geniuses and figured out how we can all grow with no work, which I'm not.
You guys out there, you got to have some more kids, because otherwise I'm going to have to do my own massages when I'm 90. Who's going to replace the workers at Jeffrey Epstein, my good buddy's island? Wow. Tells you a lot there. So why I say this is so hypocritical and why I really want to show you this is because while you get Bill Clinton talking about, low population, you get Elon Musk talking about low population, all of a sudden, it just seems like a spur of the moment thing that all of a sudden now people are recognizing, yeah, the population is starting to drop, the birth rate is dropping, and that seems to be a problem. Well, it's also a problem when Bill Gates, one of the biggest schmuck billionaires you can name, for years, not just recently, for years, talked about how the population growth is the problem. So the billionaire class that's telling you to accept more migrants because low fertility rates and low birth rates, we have to replace the workers somehow, are the same billionaires that for years told you that population growth is bad. And that's why they've done everything from war to famine to all the things imaginable to control the population. And now, oopsie daisy, now we got to bring in more people because there's not enough people. So, what is it? Which is it? Are we overpopulated? Are we underpopulated? Nothing makes sense of this. Except for the fact that billionaire class is deviously controlling the world and is taking us all for granted. Everything, all this has become one big giant scam. The whole mass migration, the whole influx of people, the great replacement, the reason that we have high unemployment here in Canada while they're bringing in more migrants to replace the workers because they claim that there's no one wants to work. That's a complete, utter lie. So here's Bill Gates over the last, I would say over a decade, talking about how the population growth is a problem. And this is the guy, as Liz Churchill's stating, arrest Bill Gates, the eugenicist, for genocide. The population growth is a problem. If we do a really good job on new vaccines, we can lower that by 10 to 15%. Now, I'll just clarify that, vaccines are very safe and effective according to YouTube standards, so consult your doctor for further consultation. I'm not a medical scientist. Did the disclaimer. But here's what he said.
The population is growing, population problem. The population growth, the population growth rate goes down. You're going to have a tripling in population by 2050. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. Here we can see a chart that looks at the total world population over the last several hundred years. And at first glance, this is a bit scary. The population.
I don't know why people don't want to have families. I don't know why people can't afford to repopulate when billionaires are doing everything they can to grow the population. Oh, it's the complete opposite. Bill Gates is telling you that, hey, you have more kids, it's going to harm the planet. Well, he flies around on a private jet while he's cutting down the rainforest to build a superhighway for more conferences. Again, this is why it's such an utter joke to hear these people talk about, you know, pro-immigration or anti-immigrant, like the whole thing. The whole thing is such an utter joke because the people responsible for this are saying two very different sides of the story. That Bill Gates over a decade has told you that a growth in the population is a crisis matter and scaring people, fear-mongering people, causing this crisis. He even said new vaccines and birth control is keeping that on wraps. That reproductive controls from billionaires are keeping that on the wraps. And at the same time, you get Bill Clinton just recently coming out and saying that, oh, we're underpopulated. That's why we got to bring in a bunch of migrants. So I don't believe that we're underpopulated. I don't believe we're overpopulated. I do believe that the billionaires are doing this draconian measure to replace people. They're doing their own kind of Charles Darwinist experiment on us. That they want to replace the average Canadian American workforce that can be qualified, that once upon a time they had good union-based jobs, they did manufacturing. You know, you think of the 50s, for example, how the economy was so great that one job, one stable job was able to put a roof on your head, raise a family, provide food to them. It was kind of like the dream. Now that dream is dead. That dream is dead because we took that dream and put it into the hands of these schmucks. And while they're telling you that it's your fault that you're not having enough kids, it's your fault, it's the generation, the younger generation, it's all their fault. They are the ones responsible for the catastrophe that's causing this population collapse, as they say. So maybe instead of Bill Clinton scolding you about the population decreasing, how there's not enough babies being born, that maybe challenges donors to say, hey, stop interfering and actually let's cooperate to make it possible for more families to exist. And maybe not let Bill Gates, the guy who barely finished college, who's now apparently a expertise in medicine, decide the fate of humanity. Maybe we should be doing that. Maybe we should be doing that. And going back to Canada here, this is from the government's website. So, did you know about this? Canada, UNHCR, and the Open Societies Foundation. That's a George Soros think tank, by the way. That's an NGO from George Soros and the, kind of liberal billionaire class. So, they all got together, seek to increase refugee resettlement through private sponsorship. So, this is them admitting that they want open borders, but they want the sponsorship, instead of being involved with the government to hold accountability, they want to pass off to private ownership, meaning that companies are responsible for sponsorship to bring these people in and exploit them for cheap labor. And when this happened September 19, 2016. September 19, 2016, the Government of Canada, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and the Open Society Foundations have agreed to launch a joint initiative aimed at increasing private sponsorship of refugees around the world. So meaning that big, giant corporations like Tim Hortons and Burger King and McDonald's and Walmart and all these chain stores, all these different areas, Amazon, that purposely bring in migrants to give them scab wages, they're doing this intentionally. That the government of Canada is allowing open borders and then passing on to corporations to do the sponsorship. This is like open smuggling. This is human trafficking done by the Canadian government and these corporations that they're doing this to undermine you. To undermine you, the average Canadian that probably worked at these facilities and then got laid off because, hey, we're just going to replace your job with a migrant. And then they'll get laid off and get replaced by a robot. The cycle of exploitation, folks. And it's only going to get worse because now with Mark Carney, this is from iPolitics, Mark Carney adds the Century Initiative co-founder to his cabal. So the guy responsible for creating this NGO telling Canadians that they have to seek a population of 100 million people by the end of the century, flooding the country with illegal aliens that we have no credentials for. We have no accountability. We have no vetting, nothing for these people, just pouring them in. Politicians are giving them amnesty. Corporations are exploiting them for cheap labor, undermining you and laying you off. Mark Carney hired the guy to be part of his political campaign. And it says Carney adds Century Initiative co-founder to Canada-U.S. Council. So Carney gave him a perfect position there. Because now he can deal directly with Canada and the United States. He's going to try and influence the United States because we know Donald Trump, you know, he's very much on stopping mass migration. So he claims. But we know that Elon Musk, the billionaire class, the donors, want mass migration. They want cheap labor. That's why Donald Trump's been wishy-washy on this. That's why instead of cracking down on illegal criminals and not going after companies that hire these mass migrants to replace the workforce, he's terrorizing cities and towns all across America and putting everybody at risk. Everybody at risk. He's cracking down on people that are writing op-eds that are critical to Israel. How is that a problem? How is somebody writing an op-ed about an opinion of a foreign country? How is that problematic for the average American? How is that problematic for the average Canadian that's dealing with crisis on top of crisis on top of crisis? So the whole thing is so hypocritical. And all this leads to is the billionaire class is purposely doing this. They're controlling the population, which means controlling the culture, controlling the narrative. They're scaring, they're fear-mongering, they're doing all their wrongdoings against humanity purposely in part of this like Darwinist experiment so they can mold the perfect worker, the perfect slave worker that they could scab and exploit instead of actually investing properly into the country so we can make it more prosperous to have more people, you know, develop families and, you know, bring kids into this world. Instead of doing these stunts. Because you're saying two totally different things. We're overpopulated, but yet we're underpopulated. We need more people coming in, but yet we don't want to actually invest in, you know, making sure that people can afford to have families. We don't want to do that, but we want to bring in mass migrants. It's a giant scam, folks. That's what it really is.